Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, Damian Lillard does it again, a walk-off winner, giving the Bucks what may be their best win of the season and capping a 4-game homestand that brought a lot to discuss. Frank and I will get into it after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia. You can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network. Joined by Frank Madden, the longtime host of the pod and Brew Hoop as well. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASE medical.com. Frank, I mentioned this may have been the best win of the season for the Bucks when you consider all of it. The night 2 of a back-to-back, 3 games in 4 days, no Khris Middleton, and we'll get to the late game execution that got them to overtime. But it would have been very easy, and Adrian Griffin talked about this after the game as well, for this team to fall down by 6 points after seeing a double-digit lead slip away. You go down by 6 in overtime, it would have been easy to pack it in. But this team made plays down the stretch, and then at the end, you're reminded why you go and trade for Damian Lillard.
Yeah, definitely not the highest quality win of the year, and nearly a very frustrating loss in spite of all the factors you just mentioned. But it did feel like just a very fun game to, in spite of the fact that you had a 12-point lead in the fourth quarter, it felt like the Bucks stole that win, given they go down 6 or kind of midway through overtime, and then get lucky with some missed free throws. Malik Monk, an 88% free throw shooter, misses 2 free throws. De'Aaron Fox misses 1 of 2, both in sort of, you're just fouling, trying to get the ball back type scenarios. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was listening to some podcasts this week, Justin, and Zach Lowe and Chris Herring were giving their all-star picks. And I believe both of them, if I understood it correctly, left Damian Lillard off their current all-star picks. And I mean, I like Zach and Chris. Zach knows certainly more about basketball than I'll ever forget. But the reasoning for why Damian Lillard, I don't think Zach had him on his all-star team either. The reasoning for Dame Lillard not being on either all-star team was just so reductive. It basically was like, Dame, you don't smile enough. It was like, you're not averaging as many points a game as last year. First off, who cares? He averaged 32 points a game. He's on a better team now. It's, the Bucks defense is bad now. Okay, is that purely a Damian Lillard problem? Is maybe the offense that we've been seeing also partly a Damian Lillard thing? He's got better advanced metrics than Tyrese Maxey, better advanced metrics than Jalen Brunson. I think Chris Herring had Julius Randle on his all-star team. What are we doing, guys? These last, I think, 3 games, I think were a really nice statement from Dame, starting with the game on Thursday against the Celtics, and then following up with these 2 games over the weekend, and especially culminating in this buzzer beater tonight. A nice reminder of what Damian Lillard can do. Again, the few days off seemed like he cleared his head, was able to spend some time with his kids, and we saw pictures of him leaving the game the last 2 games over the weekend with his kids, and he treated them to about as nice of a weekend show that you can. I've got 2 daughters. Don't think I'm ever going to be able to show them a walk-off NBA game-winning shot. So, Dame, you got us mortals beaten on that. But yeah, I just thought it was hopefully kind of a get-right week for Damian Lillard. And again, people acting like he's had this poor year, or like he struggled all year, talking about raw field goal percentage. He's been at 61% true shooting, better than Brunson, better than Maxey, better than Julius Randle, betting all these guys that supposedly are apparently all-stars now, and who have worse records than Damian Lillard. Bucks are 0-3 without him. And certainly tonight, they don't win this game without him. They don't win last night without him. And especially tonight where as you said, we're missing Khris Middleton. Again, I think just some huge shots, and again, not just Dame, Brooke Lopez hitting that three when they were down 4 off of a Giannis drive and kick late in overtime. It was, not again. Giannis had the joke. Didn't Giannis have the joke about, we can't just give up 140 points and assume we're going to score 142? Well,
Yeah.
Gave up 142 and scored 143. Maybe not the way you'd want to win all these games. We did not see a continuation of the defensive intensity we saw on Thursday. So, maybe not a sign of some sort of revolution in terms of the Bucks defense these last couple of nights, but especially with, again, more difficult games on the horizon, especially in the month of March. Banking wins is important, and we'd love it to be like we saw every game against the Celtics on Thursday. But again, if sometimes you're going to win games like we saw tonight and last night, again, they're not perfect, but they're still wins.
Dame too. I think it's funny because we had more of this conversation earlier in the year when I think a lot of Bucks fans that didn't watch a lot of Blazers games last year would kind of look around like, is he always like this slow of a starter? And you'd be reassured, like, yeah, he gets off to slow starts, and you'd hear from people in Portland if don't worry about it. And when you look at the numbers, he's not too far off his previous few seasons averages. And look, part of it too is he's asked to do a lot different or be in a much different role now than he was in Portland. Obviously, the shots are down and a lot of his 3-pointers in terms of his attempts that are down. But the biggest difference is just knowing he can pick his spots more. And I think that can come across as he's not quite as impactful when he knows it's most important for me to have it in the fourth quarter. And that's what he had. And again, it's what the Bucks have not had. I mean, obviously for decades, really, that no team, there's 3 teams in the league that have had anything close to Damian Lillard, but it's really what the Bucks had been missing, that he did not have a great shooting night tonight, but you look up and yet he was still almost up to 30 points and made the biggest impact late, where 9 of those points came in overtime. And you saw the Kings have to game plan. How do we make sure he does not get the ball in overtime in those spots and in the fourth where the Bucks needed to get to the line?
Yeah, and again, it was a weird night, right? Because you look at it, you have no Khris Middleton, so immediately your margin for error offensively is lower. Cam Payne did make an appearance tonight and hit a bunch of big shots. I mean, Cam Payne, who I have been thinking and saying that, you know what, if maybe we just kind of reduce the campaign minutes to 0, or maybe some second quarter time and cut out these like fourth quarter campaign minutes, like that might be a good thing. He certainly did his part tonight. 15 points from Cam, and just had his 3 ball working. First time we've seen him since he had the neck injury that kept him out of a couple games. And so you had some contributions there. Bobby Portis, 22 points on 11 shots, and Giannis, I mean, again, like our standards are impossibly high, right? 27 points on 16 shots, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. Let's start with that, right? Like for mere mortals, those are awesome numbers. For Giannis, I sort of felt like, man, why wasn't he able to attack Sabonis a little bit more? And Sabonis had a great night, 9 out of 10 shooting. Kind of was able to get to his spots in the lane, even hit a 3. 15 assists, that kind of dribble handoff offense that they run, and which makes them so deadly, was working really well. And they were shooting the lights out, and for most of the night, the Bucks were shooting the lights out as well. So this was just one of those games that, again, as kind of felt like an Indiana game in some respects. The offense is run differently because obviously, a lot of this offense is Sabonis dominated, not like the Halliburton sort of high pick and roll offense in the exact same way. But this is a super difficult, offense to contain. And again, the Bucks did well for stretches, but Sacramento shot really well. I think they were over 40%, I think, for the night. Again, it just felt like anytime one of the teams got into a little bit of a funk, the other team, if you missed 3 shots in a row, then it seemed like the other team was making a run. And obviously it kind of swung back and forth. And Bucks really should have had this game, after the bench early in the fourth kind of gave them a nice boost. You would have liked for them to just sort of take care of business, but credit the Kings. They just kind of kept coming. And some interesting decisions down the stretch in terms of the Bucks fouling. I would say some overcompensation from, we've seen this team previously, like quote unquote, forget to intentionally foul when they were up 3. In this game, they were just fouling very aggressively when they were up 3 with 17 seconds left. They fouled intentionally. When they were up 3 with 10 seconds left, they fouled intentionally. And they put Giannis not inbounding the ball, and he made 3 out of 4 free throws. But, very nearly, so I would say their late game strategy in terms of the fouling game and inbounding very nearly cost them this game. But again, I'm going to be interested to see the next time they're in this situation, because I would hope that maybe the strategy would be a little bit different. I don't know, Justin. I think Adrian Griffin talked about a little bit in the post game we were discussing before the pod. I did not catch it, but I don't know what your reflections were, because it was definitely again, it seemed like they were kind of maybe swinging back too far the other direction after catching some flack for not fouling against the Bulls. And I forget what the other game was. I know that we had another game recently where they didn't foul up 3.
Yeah, I don't remember what that one was either. He did talk about it. I would assume this will take up a bulk of the conversation, because the late game execution for the Bucks left much to be desired. So we'll get into that and the comments of Adrian Griffin that he made to the media after the game coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Jace Medical, and I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of real life, but if we can talk for just a minute about preparing for real life. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than any of those close to you being sick and unable to get their life-saving medication that they need. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses like UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, and many others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It has never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use the offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASE.com. And Frank, we should also remind the viewers and listeners, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, the late game execution. So you and I were talking about this beforehand. As it was happening, there was a play where Malik Beasley, I think it was De'Aaron Fox, fouled him with right around 20 seconds left. And when it happened, both Dave Kane and I kind of looked at each other and questioned, was that an intentional foul? Because it certainly seemed like it. And we saw some type of instruction from Adrian Griffin on the sidelines to Malik Beasley specifically. It was on Malik Monk, who made both of the free throws. And at that point, the Bucks were up by 3. 17 seconds is still an awful lot of time to get into the let's play the foul and free throw game here. But nonetheless, it really seemed to prolong things and keep the Kings around even longer. I mean, 3-point game is still a 1-possession game, but they did it there. They did it again on Malik Monk or on De'Aaron Fox with 11 seconds left, somewhere around there, 9 seconds when he caught the inbounds. And Adrian Griffin said after the game, when he was asked about that by our pal Eric Name, we didn't foul against Chicago when we were up by 3, so we made it our rule, and we're sticking to it. It's something that we discussed as a team after that game and said if we're in that position again, we would have some hard rules. Fox was a little further away from the 3-point line when we fouled him, but we didn't want to take any chances of him eluding us. and getting a 3-pointer up. Players and staff were all in agreement. So I would do that again 10 times out of 10. Those guys just kept fighting and found a way. But that is apparently the hard and fast rule now. Even though if memory serves, there was one game where that was not the case. I'm fine with that being the rule. If that's, we're going to foul when we're up by 3, just so the opponent can't tie it on a 3. But 17 seconds and 9 seconds is not really where I'm doing it. I'm playing defense on that sequence where it's 17, and I'm waiting a little deeper in the clock outside of 9 seconds to make that on De'Aaron Fox and that second one.
Yeah, and on the broadcast, I think Marcus referenced, like typically you want to wait till like 7 or 8 seconds before you start to think like that. And again, it's just, and I was thinking back to, Justin, you probably remember this because you're a sicko like me. Do you remember when I think, I can't remember if they were up by 3. I think they might have been up by even more than 3. But
Is
Jason
this with
Kidd,
a previous coach? Okay.
yes. Yeah. There was that Jason Kidd game, and I want to say it was like
I think it was
Detroit.
4 that they were up.
Yeah. And I think it was against Detroit, and the Bucks.
And
he had them intentionally foul.
And his quote was
Pistons.
something like he was specifically trying to avoid a 4-point play.
Well, and remember later he got mad because Giannis didn't intentionally miss a free throw up 3 with like a second left, and Giannis missed it anyway.
Time. Yeah.
And then he got mad at Giannis afterwards. Yeah. So anyway, so again, like it's not that bad. Okay, I will say this: what happened today was not the up 4 fouling because you're worried about a 4-point play foul, which I'm pretty sure, like if you're worried about a 4-point play, just don't foul.
And if memory
going for
serves,
a foul feels like it's like you're kind of inviting the 4-point play. But
whoever they were playing, if memory serves, did not have timeouts left. There was like 10 seconds left. Just the overall sequence of events that would need to happen for what Jason Kidd feared the most is what was like, really? Okay.
Yeah, Jason was living in a very weird world of fears at that point. Yeah, so but I think long story short, the reason why you say like wait till 7, 8 seconds is because at that point it becomes like very hard to play the foul game, right? Mm-hmm. If you foul intentionally with 7 seconds left, then A, they have to make 2 free throws, and then B, for them to foul you and you go down and shoot free throws, and then for them to get the ball back and have to come back and try to hit a shot, it's just harder to do that versus when you do it with 17 seconds left, like the game can get very long. And the upside was that the Kings did run out of timeouts. So by doing this, like they did get to a situation where the Kings didn't have a timeout on the last foul call where Giannis went to the line. But the problem was he misses the second free throw, and then De'Aaron Fox goes length of the floor. And credit to him, Giannis was there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you would say, okay, Giannis, go show me your, former defensive player of the year. Go, force a miss. But again, Fox is awesome, and he went out and just went at Giannis and got a bucket. And it was like, oh, okay, like they just tied the game. It was very weird. Like as it was happening, I was like, I thought we were gonna win this game, and then like no, he just drove right down the court and banked that shot in, and crap. I think it was like under 3 seconds left, and problem was at that point the Bucks didn't have a timeout, right? Because of the timeouts they took trying to inbound the ball on the previous possession. So that was really kind of the other part of. Oh, can you hear me, Justin? Sorry, my screen's.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, Pat Connaughton had to call the timeout.
Sorry, my video is
the previous
is scrolling, but.
Yeah, to that point you were making. So Pat Connaughton had to burn the final timeout, inbounding the ball or attempting to inbound the ball. So that took that away from the Bucks. The Kings had the same thing, but as we were talking about before, the bigger part, I think, the big picture of what the Bucks strategy was, the big picture of the defensive strategy to foul, I agree with. But I think what you can nitpick more, and Adrian Griffin talked about this aspect as well, was getting the ball into Giannis as the guy that's taking those free throws in that moment of the game. And, look, I get that teams are going to gear up and try to take Damian Lillard out of it. And the play that the Bucks ran that first time when the Kings still had a foul to give, you saw the Kings adjustment of knowing, okay, the Bucks are going to try to get Dame in the backcourt again. So let's load up and move to half court so he can't get that clean release. Adrian Griffin after the game, and I think maybe not quite as much, but there were some people that were questioning, how are you going to explain this one away too, with Giannis taking those 4 attempts? And look, he made 3 of them. And when you look at games in the clutch, Giannis is a 76 or 77% free throw shooter in those games. So I know he touts, I make them when they matter. For the most part, he typically does. But it is still, you got Damian Lillard on this team. I'd feel much more comfortable if you were doing everything you could to get him the ball. I know Khris wasn't on the floor tonight, but even guys like Beasley and Brooke Lopez. So it comes down to one of the conversations we've had quite a bit of, in that spot, don't you want Giannis inbounding the ball? And if you need an outlet, as they used him on 2 of those, you can use Brooke Lopez in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, Giannis is a good passer and he's super tall, which is also another good trait to have when you're inbounding the ball late in games, because obviously you got somebody jumping up trying to obscure your vision. Probably easier for Giannis to make a pass than Pat Connaughton, who's whatever, Pat's 6'4", 6'5", right? 7, 8 inches shorter than Giannis. So yeah, that was a bit odd, and I'm guessing it comes down to Giannis doesn't want to be inbounding a ball, and he wants to be potentially getting a chance to shoot free throws and a chance to prove them. So something to bear in mind, right? Like, we'll see if that just continues to be the approach. And credit to the Kings, like, they basically said, we're going to take Damian away. And this is where actually the Kings not having fouled earlier in overtime, the Bucks, I think, got into the penalty pretty quickly. And the Kings were not. And so they had that foul to give, because they did get the ball to Damian Lillard in the backcourt initially on the first foul where Giannis made both free throws. So it was one of those situations where, I don't know, maybe they gave away their get Dame the ball play on that one. So ironically, like, it's like, run the get Giannis the ball play when you've got a foul to give, and then run your play to get Dame the ball when you're in the penalty. So again, these are kind of these are these small things that can absolutely make the difference, right? When it comes down to a free throw here, a free throw there.
And Adrian Griffin after the game was asked about that as well, about Giannis going to the line 4 times in those spots, and said, if we can't get it to Dame, we put Giannis in the back. So we have an outlet. I have complete confidence in Giannis at the end of the game. He's been tremendous. If anyone doesn't think so, go back and watch the film and rewatch games. He's made some really big free throws for us, and it's something he takes pride in. I know how hard he works on that. And when I see that, I have no problem with him taking those shots. I would do it 100 times over.
Yeah. And okay, Adrian, we get it. You're not ever going to say something in a press conference undercutting Giannis, your confidence in Giannis. But, those of us in the peanut gallery will, are willing to say maybe he's not the first choice or even the second choice to be shooting free throws late in games. Again, just I have we have enough access to stats. We know that he doesn't become Steph Curry shooting free throws late in games. So, but hey, I mean, honestly, like, he hits the first 2, and then he hit the first one the second time he went to the line. So you were kind of hoping that, like, he was again just going to keep
do it again
down. Yeah. And unfortunately, the second one was short, and again, water under the bridge now. But again, I hope that we're not talking about this as like, oh, they're doing it again. They did it again, and this time they lost, right? Because just tactically not what I think you would draw up. But
and especially if it's in a playoff game, we hope it doesn't come to that. When we come back from the break, you mentioned campaign and the boost that he gave them. Your thoughts on what we've seen and how he had been used recently, because Adrian Griffin mentioned that prior to the game. And there's one other guy that we not only did not see tonight, but have not seen for a little bit now. So we'll get into a little bit of the rotation talk coming out of this weekend as the Bucks look to keep moving things forward here. We'll have that conversation coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Well, the NFL season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Go to FanDuel. The app is easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet. Live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. It's the best way to find all the popular parlays that are out there. All of that and much more on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Frank, we saw Cam Payne tonight, and before the game, Adrian Griffin was asked about his absence, basically, for the last essentially 3 games. One of those was when he was in concussion protocol, but we didn't see him basically against the Celtics. It wasn't until Boston kind of waved the white flag. We did not see him against the Warriors over the weekend. And it does seem like the absence of Khris Middleton opened the door for him tonight, because Khris had basically taken on that role the last couple of games as that backup point guard. Adrian Griffin had said, I think, some of the things you were alluding to, that the reason we hadn't seen Cam Payne lately was, as Griff put it, some of the areas that I thought we needed the most help were rebounding and our lack of size. And that's where I just wanted to go in a different direction. It doesn't mean anything about Cam or his future with this team. I know he's a professional and he'll be ready whenever we called upon him. And I've expressed that to him as well. But I do wonder, and I'm going to be curious to see, he was very impactful tonight. You mentioned he hit some big shots and finished with 15 points, but it does seem as though they had started to find some things. Not that they fixed everything, but Khris Middleton kind of taking on that role, it changes a lot for this team. And I do wonder if what you had kind of mentioned before of, it doesn't mean you don't play Cam Payne anymore, but it's basically just second quarter when Dame's getting a breather, that Khris Middleton will take it the rest of the way once we get in the second half.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't talked much about the Warriors game, right? Only so much time here. We don't have an hour to talk about this. Justin, I'm always willing to just blather forever about the Bucks. But against the Warriors, it was interesting. You did obviously have Khris in the lineup, and essentially you had, an 8-man rotation, I believe. It's basically since the Celtics game, right? These two Celtics and Warriors games, you essentially had this 8-man rotation with the usual starting 5, and then the guys off the bench, the usual, the holdovers from the championship run, Pat and Bobby, and then Andre Jackson being the 8th guy. Today, Andre goes into the starting 5. And first, let's give credit for Saturday, because he was great, especially in the second half on Saturday. He was minus 14 in the first half. We've talked a bit about how his plus minus has been generally very bad this year. Which I think is somewhat reflective of the fact that he's a rookie. And even though we know he's got real, especially defensive tools, he's still figuring out how to kind of apply those, not get called for fouls. Some of which are, to be honest, like kind of just like rookie BS treatment stuff. Like that foul on Thursday, by the way, Justin, where like Tatum was just like walked up to him and just like pushed him.
Yeah.
And he just like went backwards and got called for a foul. It was like, what is he supposed to do there? Like, it was just very bizarre.
He had one similar to that tonight too, when I think it was De'Aaron Fox. There was a lot of it where he got him with the offhand, a little bit of a push off, and stumbled a little bit, and Andre recovered and was like, okay, I have to be just as physical with him. And then he got called for it.
Yeah. So Andre's whistle sucks. He's getting called for fouls for basically trying to play NBA defense. Again, you just hope that kind of his reputation improves with officials. But he was instrumental in that second half against the Warriors. Again, another game where, they did win by 11. Really took too long for a Warriors team that didn't have Steph, that doesn't have Draymond still, that obviously is still, struggling even when Steph has been playing. You did win by double digits, but it really took until that fourth quarter to really put them away. And I think Andre, though, really turned the tide. There was that 10-0 run. I think it was in the third quarter, where he, kind of did a little bit of everything, right? He had, I think it was after a Giannis free throw miss. He got the ball back, broken play, sees Giannis around the basket. And, what would Khris Middleton do? Throw it up to the rim, let Giannis finish it. That's what he did. Giannis gets a dunk. He had a really smart screen. Was it Chris was in the corner? Somebody was in the corner shooting a three, and Andre screened. And
Yes.
basically,
Yeah.
I think it was Giannis like threw in the pass for Chris, or or Beasley, somebody. And Andre had a really nice screen, which prevented the defender from getting out and being able to challenge it. That was like basically the next play, I think, after that alley oop. And then the most impressive thing, I mean, we saw another awesome block tonight from Brooke on Alex Len, but to see a guy of Andre's size at 6'6", get up, and I think it was Trace Jackson. Was it Trace Jackson
Yeah.
Davis who
Trace
tried to?
Jackson Davis. Yeah.
Yeah, and Trace Jackson Davis is, first off, I think he's like 6'9", very athletic, great dunker, and he tried to put Andre into a body bag on this dunk attempt, and Andre came over, challenged, miraculously did not get called for a BS foul, and rejected the shot. And that again was part of this 10-0 run that put the Bucks in the lead. And again, not that the Bucks went and hid thereafter, but that was big. And then we saw Andre. I believe we had a little bit of small lineups in the fourth quarter, as well as the Bucks kind of put the game away. Which again, we've talked a lot about how the Bucks have not gone small with Giannis at center, and no Bobby and no Brooke very much at all. And we did see at least a little bit of that on Saturday. And again, Andre has done a lot of like defending point of attack, like smaller guards. But he's big enough that he can switch and also defend. In many cases, kind of 1 through 4. So first double-double of his career, 10 points, 10 rebounds. He had a super athletic tip dunk. He had a little floater. We know he has a weird affinity for floaters. Hates shooting, but will always shoot these like floaters. And he did hit one late in the game. That kind of helped seal it. But he was great on Saturday. And then we saw the nature of being an NBA rookie on Sunday. He starts with Chris out. Makes sense. And he gets 5 fouls in 10 minutes and doesn't score a point, and pretty much was a non-factor in this game. So it's kind of the back and forth. And not only did we see campaign, because I think part of this too is like having Chris and Dame and Giannis, but then also Andre, even though he's not, again, he doesn't look to score, so he can't really play as a point guard, but he can be a supportive ball handler, help, again, get the ball into across the mid court, so you can dribble up the floor and can kind of do some connectivity stuff in half court. But he kind of took himself out of the game tonight with all these fouls. Yeah. So again, that was kind of the way it was. I thought not just odd seeing campaign, but Campaign and AJ Green paired together in a zone as the guards was a choice. And look, we're halfway through the season. We see this. Every coach does this, right? Like nobody's gonna. It's not like Griff is getting his 8-man rotation down, and these are the only guys that are gonna play the rest of the year or something like that. Like Marjon Beauchamp is gonna get another opportunity. I'm pretty confident. He's been the notable guy who has not played these last few games other than the fourth quarter of garbage time against the Celtics. So again, it's just been interesting seeing kind of, again, AJ Green get some random minutes tonight. I certainly thought Marjon Beauchamp was going to play with no Khris Middleton.
Yeah.
AJ didn't really play particularly well, hit 1 3, but really wasn't kind of doing that very much, which is really the one thing that he does. So again, what's going on with that? Is there stuff going on in practice, whatever? I don't know. Marjon seemed, I saw some like screenshots of him just sort of like sitting down and not celebrating much, whatever, right? He seemed to be happy with the rest of everybody after the Dame celebration tonight. But yeah, I mean, this is probably just how it's going to go, right? With some of these kind of late rotation guys, they're going to kind of have some nights where they, weeks where they play a lot, weeks where they don't play much. And I think probably the most frustration is going to be aimed at like Pat Connaughton, because obviously a lot of people want to see Marjon and Ajax get minutes over Pat. But again, I think Griff's going to go trust guys like Pat and Bees, who have been kind of more reliable vets over their career. And I think the question is just like, how does this evolve over the course of the season? Because I think, again, you look at especially the Celtics game and that Warriors game, you can see the argument why they really need Andre Jackson to be part of this rotation as a guy defensively that can give them a different look and actually like, really bother lead guards, wings, etc., and give them kind of, again, more switching flexibility on the perimeter. Um, so yeah, but definitely an interesting 24 hours for Andre Jackson. But I think we're going to continue to see him get opportunities. He's sort of pulled ahead of Marjon and the other young guys, certainly in the pecking order. But again, hopefully it's not going to be because of a bunch of injuries, but I'm sure we're going to see those other guys get opportunities as well. And as always, it's just a question of whether young, the question with young guys, like how do they stay ready and how do they take advantage of opportunities when they get them? Because that's how you get yourself more opportunities. You take advantage of the ones that you get.
And we should point out to no Khris Middleton in the game against the Kings. Griff said before the game, because we did see him play in both sets of the back-to-back most recently, last week, said this wasn't any type of a setback or any of that. This was more of just, this was 3 games in 4 days, and
no national TV,
no national TV
thing hanging over them.
Let's give him some rest there. The last thing I did want to mention before we wrap it up here about Andre Jackson Jr. And look, the other point that you made, which I agree with, is, I've seen a lot of people jumping to conclusions on Marjon. This by no means means the door is closed there. Go back to earlier in the year when the hype train was started to take off for Andre Jackson Jr., and then all of a sudden he disappeared and Marjon was playing again. So you're going to see Marjon Beauchamp back in the rotation and getting minutes at some point. It's just the way the ebbs and flows of an 82-game season are. But to cap off the point on Andre, I don't know if you saw this or before the Warriors game or after it, but what struck me most, and I think a lot of us in the room when we heard it kind of turned and looked at each other too, was Griffin was asked about Andre Jackson Jr. prior to that game against the Warriors and how he would rate his progress so far, something along the lines of that, and specifically mentioned Christian Braun and said, he reminds me of Christian Braun in that he's a contributor. I like what I see defensively. We're starting to get that trust in him. And Christian Braun was able to contribute during a playoff run for the Nuggets, and that was critical to their success. I kind of see that in Andre Jackson Jr. as well. And he went on to talk about the fouls and the fact that he's not overly concerned. He mentioned those matchups against, or those couple of possessions against Jason Tatum, where overall he thought he held his own, and his discipline in that he'll get a foul or two, but they're typically not careless fouls. And that's where that comp kind of came from. But to hear Christian Braun, because as we've all talked about, I get that he's the new toy and we're all excited by what he brings, but it's not common to see rookies or even second-year players have a big impact or be a big part of the rotation in the playoffs. And for Adrian Griffin to specifically mention Christian Braun, who was, I think, caught a lot of us off guard.
Yeah, and I think an important thing to point out, though, with Christian Braun, I mean, he was not just like a consistent every night positive player during the Nuggets playoff run either, right? I mean, they had this kind of stick with him, and the couple games where he made, a real positive impact in the finals, like they got to that because they were able to live with some of the nights when he didn't do anything and maybe was on the floor when they didn't defend well, right? So we'll see if the Bucks are as kind of similarly patient with Andre as the Nuggets were with Christian Braun. Other interesting parallel: Christian Braun won the championship with Kansas, then goes to Denver, wins a championship in his first year with the Nuggets as well. Andre Jackson wins at UConn last year, has a chance, if by some the grace of the good Lord, the Milwaukee Bucks can win an NBA championship this year. He can follow in Christian Brown's footsteps and go from being an NCAA champion to an NBA champion in back-to-back years. So yeah, we'll just kind of see kind of how it evolves. But again, the season is long, and this is just the start of it. I think just before we go, Justin, we didn't talk a lot about Khris just because he didn't play tonight. But 24 points, 10 assists on Saturday night, made a bunch of big plays in the fourth
Fourth
quarter.
quarter, yeah.
Especially I think of like the two alley-oops he had to Giannis. Like the first one, like just a very like weird, like straight down the middle. Giannis,
Yeah.
pretty sure Giannis got fouled and just
Yeah.
sort of like laid it up and in. Like just the angle to think to make that pass is sort of, again, Khris is the guy that is just trusts Giannis and his ability to catch everything. So that was impressive. And then I don't know if it was a one possession later or a couple of possessions later, but you know, coming in with, they kind of, you know, I think they got a rebound or a turnover or something, and Giannis gets picked up by Brandon Pajemski, who had an amazing game. Let's say that. You know, for some reason I don't. I mean, I think a lot of people don't like Tyler Harrow. I don't either. He plays for the Heat. What's to like? Brandon Pajemski, way higher Q factor as a, you know, white Wisconsin guy who seems like he's got a bright future in the NBA. He looked great for the Warriors on Saturday night, and he's been playing really well. But he had to pick up Giannis in transition. Giannis kind of think took one look at him and basically kind of moved towards the basket. And Khris sees little Brandon Pajemski and says, "You know what? I'm just going to chuck the ball up to Giannis." And Giannis wheels around and throws down an awesome reverse alley oop dunk, which again, just sort of one more alley oop, you know, in the archive between Khris Middleton and Giannis Antetokounmpo. And again, I thought it's funny, you know, Khris, we didn't talk much about Khris when Camille and I talked about the Celtics game because he only had 5 points, right? I think he only was like 2 for 7 or something. But his movement, right? Just the way he's moving on the floor offensively, you see it in the scoring average ticking up the way it has. But I think just as importantly, I think defensively, he's just looked a lot sprier on defense, I think, than he has previously. And look, he's going to lay off guys a little bit. Like you can kind of tell he's got to measure things a little bit. You know, not that Khris was ever really athletic. I think there's been sort of 3 defensive phases to his career. That was sort of like the really good defender, you know, sort of young Khris version.
Yeah.
And then there was, I think, the version that we saw around the time of the championship and sort of the year before that as well, where it wasn't really kind of the impact defender maybe that he was before, would get blown by. You know, like once, twice a game, just would kind of get caught flat-footed and just didn't have the kind of a lateral quickness to keep up. But you know, now I think we're getting pretty close to what I think he was a couple years ago. And again, maybe he won't get fully back there, but he just thinks the game, he sees the game, he knows how to play. You know, that's why the defensive numbers look way better with him on the floor than when he's on the bench. And again, is he going to, you know, lock down Jason Tatum in a playoff series? No. But he held up well in at least the first half when Tatum was actually on the floor on Thursday. And, you know, again, they need him to at least provide some resistance when he's in matchups like that. And again, it's not to say that the Bucks shouldn't be thinking about how they get different options and just expecting Khris to go out and stop, you know, dangerous wings, because Khris has never been the strongest guy in the world necessarily. But again, if he can give them possessions, you know, Eric Name always likes to point out that Khris was the one defending Kevin Durant during a lot of like the overtime of Game 7 against the Nets, right? We always think of like, oh, it was PJ or Drew doing all that, but Khris had a lot of important shifts against KD late in Game 7 of that series, and you know, he goes 0 for 6 in overtime, which nobody ever really likes to talk about. So again, if Khris Middleton is just like competent as a man defender and doing kind of the stuff that we know he's capable of as a team defender, again, it doesn't solve the Bucks' defensive problems, but you know, if we can at least turn one of the, you know, point guard, shooting guard, small forward positions into like, okay, at least we don't have to like be like super worried about that position defensively. That's pretty important if this team's going to ever defend at a high enough level to win a championship this year.
And that big game against the Warriors, 13 points and 5 assists in the fourth quarter for Khris. And I was talking about this with somebody last night during that Warriors game from the Warriors about Khris and his up and down play, however you want to put it, throughout the season, just his overall growth and how the Bucks have brought him along this year. And we had both kind of mentioned, it kind of reminds you of Klay Thompson in many ways, that there's similarities there where he's going to be able to score. And that is certainly looking better and better. And same for Klay, that he'll have nights like we saw against the Bulls prior to the Bucks game where he'll score 30 and knock down threes. They're not the same athlete defensively, but what they do bring is their length and size and just the defensive IQ. And that's what you're banking on if you're the Bucks. And look, it's just like we talked about with the Dame acquisition. It's changed everything for Khris too. When you think about what he'll have in the tank to give you, when it's not just, hey man, we need you to score 25 to 30 a night, because that's where this offense is of, we got Giannis and Dame. So whatever you give us is great. That's a bonus.
Yeah. And the nice part is in the playoffs, all those guys are going to see their minutes extended. So there's going to be less time where, Khris has to run an offense by himself. But I think he deserves a lot of credit, right? I mean, again, like people get so worked up about like him having like turnovers when he's trying to dribbling against double teams, things like that. I mean, he has like a shade over 2 turnovers a game. Like I swear some people like there's like some exchange rate. Like if people see one Khris turnover, they treat it like it's
worth 4,
like it's worth 4 turnovers or something like that. Like someone was messaging with me today. I said Khris was still felt like the best passer on the Bucks, and they're like, well, he throws one nice pass, but then he makes 4 or 5 like bad passes because he gets. It's like I just was looking at data. It's like he's averaged like one pass related like a little over 1 pass related turnover per game the last 2 years. It's like people like just like like don't let your brains like go crazy about this stuff. And again, like has Khris handled against pressure too much at times? Like, yeah, I totally agree, right? Like he had a couple bad turnovers like in the IST game in Vegas, totally get it, right? But again, like we're not talking about like some guy who's averaging, 4 assists and 4 turnovers or something like that. It's not like an epidemic, right? We're talking about tweaking some things and whatever it might be. Like it's still a huge luxury to have a guy like Khris as your third banana, because again, the combination of shooting and playmaking at his size, it's still pretty rare. And again, I know we never talk about we never talked about like the trade Khris stuff, right? But just again, it's just funny, like the noise that there was like, a month or 2 ago about like, oh, they got to look at trading Middleton. It's like, well, if he's as bad as you think he is, then what are you going to,
I'm sure he's got a great market
value for him. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And, look, if your argument now is that he's got some great market value you can trade for, like what I always say is, show me the trade. Show me the Khris Middleton trade that makes this team better and helps them in the long term. And I'll listen to it. But yeah, again, just fingers crossed that him and the rest of these guys stay healthy. And again, Bucks have been very lucky with health, right? We gotta, I'm gonna keep saying that. Like, let's not act like the Bucks haven't been. Giannis has played all but 1 game. He played with the shoulder. Yeah. Who knows if the shoulder was bothering him tonight? And fortunately, weird schedule coming up. I just looked at it right after the game. 3 games against the Cavs and 2 against the Pistons in the next 5. Like, well,
their next 5 games are against the Cavs and Pistons, because you have the 1 in Cleveland, then the 2 games in Detroit, and then you come home for 2 against Cleveland.
So very weird schedule. But fortunately, they got a couple off days here. They don't have to play again until Wednesday against Cleveland. So again, a little chance to kind of recharge batteries. Chance for Dame to spend some more time with his kids. And again, like hopefully just continue to get the vibes to a better place. Because I don't know, I don't know how real it always is and how much of it's like a reflection of kind of like Bucks fans just going insane whenever the Bucks lose. But it's been a nice 4 days. And oh yeah, we didn't even talk about the Packers, but man, that was for Wisconsin sports fans. This was a nice little nightcap. Bucks getting an awesome buzzer-beating win. But yeah, this would have been a pretty good game to lose if you're just trying to sneak a loss in, because most of Wisconsin is just still in ecstasy on cloud nine from that Packers win, which I was at a bar in Austin, Texas, full of Packer fans. It was one of the more impressive things certainly I've seen in by a Packer team. So shout out to Wisconsin sports, giving us some things to be happy about.
This would have been a good place to have the Jazz game today and maybe beat them last week. But instead, it creates for one of the more memorable sports days in Wisconsin in the last few years with that Packers win and Damian Lillard with the nightcap and that walk-off against the Kings. We will we'll leave it there. And as you mentioned the schedule, Frank, it does get very strange as you got 2 days off, then you go to Cleveland for 1 day or one game, then you got 2 days off, and then you have that series in Detroit and then a series in Milwaukee against the Cavs. So a very strange schedule to look ahead to for the Bucks in the coming days. We'll get to that in these next few days here, but relish this one as Damian Lillard does it again, lifting the Bucks to this win over the Sacramento Kings. We'll be back on the podcast tomorrow to start to take a look ahead at this strange week for the Bucks. For Frank, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you then.